so much more in awe. I would be so much more blown away by everything God's doing if I learned to recognize it sooner so I can watch it first person. You know what I mean? So I'm not looking back and realizing what he did. So in the moment, I'm going, I see what you're doing. I see what you're putting together. But we get to experience that power of God, that authority of God over everything. Ultimate authority, infinite authority over everything, over living things, over circumstances, over the solar system, over planets, over this all that was created. God has authority over all of that. But I'm not a sports fan. We were talking about bowling and we were talking about golf on break. I don't know if golf's even considered a sport. Somebody's going to email me about that. But I've tried to get into sports. I've tried to get into watching sports, not playing them because I'm too old to play sports. I hurt sometimes just getting out of bed, so I don't want to play any sport that's going to make me hurt worse. But I've tried getting into sports and I just can't do it. They don't hold my attention. I'm a very tactile person. I need to be touching something. I need to be holding something, working on something. And I can't do that when I'm watching sports on TV. But I mean, I've tried football and baseball. I almost got into football for a very short period of time, but it just didn't hold my interest long enough. Any sport, I would try to watch it, try to get into it, try to get excited about it, try to find a team that I could follow. And nothing ever clicked with me. Anything. If competitive knitting was a sport, I'd watch that. But I just couldn't get into anything. But one thing that I think is really cool about sports is there's iconic sports moments. There's things that happen in sports history that are just so incredible that they go down as these iconic sports moments. And I love those. I love the underdog stories. One of my favorite is the Miracle on Ice, the 1980 Olympics when the USA beat the Russians in the Olympics. And USA was such a huge underdog going into this. And for them to win was just, it boggled everybody's minds. It wasn't even a possibility. Nobody was even watching. Nobody was even going to watch it because they're like, this is just going to be a washout. But more and more people tuned in as it went on because they're really in this, and they ended up winning. So an incredible sports moment. People still talk about that. Muhammad Ali, the Rumble in the Jungle, that was 1974. It was the year I was born. But he took back his heavyweight title from George Foreman. He had lost his title previously, and this was the fight where he got his title back. And again, it wasn't something that's supposed to happen. You don't regain your title. You don't regain that heavyweight title, but Muhammad Ali did. Maybe one that's a little more... I don't know if anybody's a Chicago Bears fan. I was a Chicago Bears fan back in 1986 during the Super Bowl Shuffle. You remember this? Yeah. William the Refrigerator Perry's touchdown. That is an iconic sports moment. To watch that giant man, that 300-pound man go over that line into the end zone. But I love iconic sports moments. I'm fascinated with them. But one of my favorites is Game 3 of the 1932 World Series. And Babe Ruth hits a home run. And if you know Babe Ruth, you're going, Babe Ruth hit a lot of home runs. So what? Maybe you don't know who Babe Ruth is. You'd have to look that up. But in Game 3 of the 1932 World Series, Babe Ruth comes up to bat. And before the pitch is thrown, he points out into the bleachers. And the next pitch, he hits the ball right out into the bleachers right where he pointed. And there's all kinds of speculations, like, did he really point? He never said specifically that he did, but he never denied it. But there's still people arguing to this day, like reviewing the footage of him pointing. He clearly pointed and he hit the ball right where he pointed. But what makes that so much more miraculous is he called it right before he did it, right? It's people hit home runs all the time, but you don't see anybody walk up to the plate, point, and then smack the ball right where they pointed. And that's exactly what he did in that 1932 World Series. But God sending Jesus to us the exact way he said he would is more miraculous than if Babe Ruth would have walked out into the bleachers and set a thumbtack on the seat and then walked back over to home plate and smacked the ball and hit that thumbtack. It's so... The prophecies regarding Jesus were so specific, so down to minute details, specific, that it makes it virtually impossible. And I'm one of those people, I'm kind of a number guy. So nothing is impossible. There are virtual impossibilities, and you can take them out to a point where it's so far beyond the realm of possibility that it's a certainty. But there's always a 1% out of 20 quadrillion that maybe this could happen some other way. So that's kind of what we get down to. But we talked about in the Christmas service, we talked about a book, and I want to talk about that book a little bit because they looked at the odds of somebody fulfilling. There's over 500 prophecies. Going back 1,000 years before Jesus was born, there are over 500 prophecies of the coming Messiah, what he was going to do, who he was going to be, how to recognize him. This was going back 1,000 years. And so out of those 500, these two authors looked at 8. Out of 500, they looked at 8. And they said, okay, what are the odds of one single person making all 8 of these true, correct? So we're going to talk about that a little bit because, like I said, this is one of those things that's mind-blowing to me. So a lot of these prophecies were very exacting details. His family line, who his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were going to be, right? Because they said he's going to come out of the line of David. If you look at the lineage of Jesus in any of the Gospels, they have the lineage of Jesus. But if you go and you look at, if you read through that and you read how far back David was. So for them to say, obviously everybody knew who King David was. He was a huge person in history, especially in Israelite history. But it was many, many, many generations before Jesus was David. And they said he's going to come out of David's line. So you think about this giant family tree starting from David at the bottom and just branching out everywhere. And they perfectly predicted that Jesus Christ is going to be in that line. And he was. So they pinpointed where he was going to be born. They pinpointed the miracles he would do. They gave details of his death. And the crazy thing about that is the way Jesus died, crucifixion didn't exist. It was 800 years before crucifixion would exist before they predicted it. So they predicted and they said that his hands and his feet were going to be pierced. 800 years before that was even a way that they killed people. The Romans invented ways to kill people. They were very good at it. And they invented the worst ways possible that they could make people die. It was gruesome. They would run tests to see how they could keep somebody alive for the longest possible period of time where they would suffer the most amount of pain, and they would put them to death because their executions were very public. Christ was crucified on top of a mountain, on Golgotha Mountain. They crucified him in a very public way. They did that because they want to make people afraid of him, right? They want everybody to be afraid of the Romans, so they listened to them, so they would obey and do what they were told. But again, they had direct details of how he was going to die. All of these things, hundreds of years before he was even born, hundreds of years before the possibility even existed for him to be crucified that way. So this is a huge point of apologetics, is when you start looking at the apologetics is the study of it's defending our faith. It's why we believe what we believe. And I really suggest that you have strong reasons why you believe what you believe. Don't believe what you believe because your pastor told you to believe them. Don't believe what you believe because it's what your parents told you to believe. Don't believe what you believe because your friends or your spouse, that's what they believe. But set up for yourself. Understand why you believe what you believe. Test it. Make sure you understand it. Do you believe what you believe? And I think with Christianity, I'll say this, for me personally, it's the only religion that if you dig into it, you can continue to believe it more and more the more you look into it. Like it becomes more obvious as you dig into Christianity, as you dig into the life of Christ, as you dig into God and his personality and how much he loves us. As you dig into that more, it just becomes more and more obvious to you that this is true. We should be able to recognize the truth, but don't ever base your faith on anything else but your own understanding, on what you know about it. Why do you believe what you believe? You should always be able to answer that, and that's what apologetics is being able to answer those questions. When people challenge what you believe, can you back up what you believe? So in apologetics, these odds, these possibilities of it being anyone other than Jesus Christ, who was the prophesied Messiah, we're going to look at how incredibly small these numbers become, or how incredibly large, depending on how you look at it. But the book we're going to be looking at is called Science Speaks. It was first copyrighted in 1958, and the two authors were Peter Stoner and Robert Newman. Like I said, if you were at the Christmas service, we referenced this book at the Christmas service, and I was preparing for this class then, and I already had a bunch of prophetic stuff in there about the coming Christ, but this book, and I hesitate to even call it a book. It's more like a pamphlet. It's literally like 60 pages long. If you want to look at it, it's online. You can find the PDF. It's called Science Speaks. You can find it online free. It's just available. You can download it. You can read it. 60 pages. The prophecy of Jesus Christ coming, of the prophecies of Christ coming and how those odds work out is just one part of this. That's actually, I think that's probably about like 4 or 5 pages out of the 60, but they look at different aspects of Christianity and they look at the odds. And like I said, I'm a science guy, so I love numbers. So seeing their research, and then even today I went through their numbers and I updated their numbers. Like I said, that was 1958, the numbers first came out. The book first came out, so their numbers were based on 1958. Well, I extended that out to 2021 just to give us the most accurate numbers I can. I'm no mathematician, so I did the best I could, so you have to give me some grace. But when I tell you some of these numbers, you're going to think I'm making up these words because they don't even sound like real numbers. But first copyrighted in 1958. The authors were Peter Stoner, and just to give you a little bit of their background, Peter Stoner was the chairman of the Department of Mathematics and Astronomy at Pasadena City College. He was the chairman of the science division at Westmont College. He was the professor emeritus of science at Westmont College. He was the professor emeritus of mathematics and astronomy at Pasadena City College. So these guys have the background, right? These guys have the number background. Robert Newman was a PhD in astrophysics at Cornell University. He had a Master of Sacred Theology through the Bible School of Theology. He was the associate professor of physics and mathematics at Shelton College, and he was the associate professor of New Testament in the Biblical School of Theology. So, like I said, hundreds of prophecies going back 1,000 years before Christ, and we're just going to look at 8 of them. But I'm going to tell you what the prophecy was, and then I'm going to read you the scripture, because I want to back up everything I say with scripture. But the first one was that Jesus would come from Bethlehem, and that's found in Micah 5:2. It says, "But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, are only a small village among all the people of Judea. Yet a ruler of Israel whose origins are in the distant past will come from you on my behalf." So we're going to start talking about the odds. And here's the thing about odds. Every time you add another criteria, every time you add another criteria to what we're putting together, you have to multiply the odds together, because every odd multiplies with all the other odds that you're saying have to be true. So we're going to look and see what are the odds of one person making all of these prophecies true in that one person. So the best estimate I could find for the average population of Bethlehem from Micah until today, and then you divide that average by the average population of the earth, and that's from 700 BC. So Micah was written in 700 BC. So the average population of the earth from 700 BC to 2021 is about 4 billion. I think we're up to like 7 billion now. We got 7 billion people on the planet. But the average from Micah till 2021 was about 4 billion. The average population of Bethlehem is not a huge town, so the average population of Bethlehem for the same period was 12,650. So the odds so that first one says that Jesus would come from Bethlehem. So the odds of any given person coming from Bethlehem from Micah to 2021 is 1 out of 316,206. So out of every 316,206 people, one person came from Bethlehem. So that's the first criteria. That's the first prophecy that they tracked. The next one was that Jesus would have a predecessor who would come before him and would lay the groundworks for his ministry, and that's found in Micah 3:1. It says, "Look, I am sending my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. Then the Lord you are seeking will suddenly come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you look for so eagerly is surely coming, says the Lord of heaven's armies." So John the Baptist it is undeniable that John the Baptist was a forebearer to Christ. the ministry of John the Baptist was all about creating this way for Christ. He was out there proclaiming Christ's coming immediately before Christ came. So right before Jesus Christ came, John the Baptist was in the wilderness saying, the Messiah is coming, and the Messiah is coming immediately, like he's coming soon. And then when Jesus came down to be baptized, John the Baptist saw him coming, and he's like, behold, here he is. Like, this is the guy I've been telling you about. Here he is. And the Holy Spirit came down on him and landed on him like a dove. So we're looking at, so now we're adding these prophecies together. So the first prophecy that he would come from Bethlehem. The second prophecy is that he's going to come from Bethlehem, and he's going to have a predecessor come before him that is going to pave the way for his ministry. So, and if you start, so the first one was 1 in 316,000, but if you say that, okay, out of every 316,000 people, how many of those people also had a predecessor that came before them and paved a way for this ministry that they were going to have? At that point, for me, it's like, what's the odds of that? 1 in a billion. I mean, the odds start getting very small. And that's what they said too. So they said, what we'll do is we'll just go the world over, in the entire world, every single person in the world that came and had a ministry on this earth, how many of them had a noticeable predecessor that came before them that paved a way for their ministry? They had to expand it out to the world, because if they zeroed it in on just people that came from Bethlehem, already your numbers are just astronomical how precise this is. So if they took it out to the entire world, they're saying they're gonna go to 1 in 1,000. So out of every 1,000 people who had a ministry, 1 out of that 1,000 had a predecessor that came before them that paved a way for their ministry, that basically laid out the steps of their ministry before they arrived. So the next one, the third one, I said there's 8. I'm trying to hurry through this now. But the next one is Jesus will ride into Jerusalem on a donkey colt. And again, when you talk about a precise prophecy, you just can't get more precise than this. How would somebody hundreds of years before Christ know that I can't think of the name, that Jesus would ride into Bethlehem on the back of a donkey, of a foal. They didn't even say it was going to be the back of a donkey, but they said the foal of a colt. It was going to be a young donkey. So we're going to go to Zechariah 9:9. It says, "Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey, riding on a donkey's colt." Just not only what city he was coming into, but also that he would be riding on a colt. And so much of what Jesus did at the time, we talk about seeing Jesus in the rearview mirror. We talk about seeing Christ after he's done things. We see God's work after he's already done them. But for his disciples, they're like, why in the world are you sending us to get this donkey for you to ride into Jerusalem? We can just walk. We can just walk to Jerusalem. But all these things, then looking back, you realize that all these things were to fulfill the prophecy. So everything pointed to Jesus. There was no doubt. There was no misunderstanding. There was no, we think we got the wrong guy. It absolutely had to be Jesus, because he fulfilled all these things that the prophet said he was going to do. So this is the same way as the last one, that it gets so restrictive. If you start adding all of these together, it just gets so restrictive. So if they go, so this time they said, so okay, the whole entire world over, king entering a city. How many times has a king entered a city on a donkey's colt? And the best number they could put to it is 1 out of 100. And honestly, they could find no other recorded reference of that ever happening except for Christ. No other recorded reference in history. So they said, well, maybe 1 out of 100. Maybe out of 100 times that a king entered a city, he entered on a donkey. We'll put it at 100. Or 1 out of 100. The fourth one was that Jesus would be betrayed by a friend, resulting in a wound to his chest. And that's in Zechariah 13:6. And it's again, Zechariah was a prophet, so he had these visions of the coming Messiah, and he's writing these visions down. And so he says in Zechariah 13:6, and if someone asks, then what about the wounds on your chest? In the King James Version, it says wounds on the hand, which work equally as well. And he said, I will say I was wounded at my friend's house. Again, it's super specific, take into account all 4 of these having to be true. And the thing I got when I started reading this is I read that prophecy, and I'm like, it doesn't say exactly that. And none of these say Jesus by name. But even if you start like, okay, well, I don't like this one, so I'm going to take this one out. Even if you remove one, and we're just looking at 8, but even if you remove one, then what are you going to do with the other 500? Say even if you removed 100 out of the 400 that you're like, well, maybe it doesn't say exactly that. So you start removing those, the numbers still go so astronomically high. The odds of it being anyone other than Jesus Christ that was sent as the Messiah, that all these prophecies have been about. And again, you put this time frame in there where it's hundreds of years, 1,000 years before he was born, all these prophecies started being put together. And when you start applying these to anybody else in the world, the odds just get so incredibly small. So for this one, they gave it 1 in 10 odds that that somebody would be betrayed by a friend and it would result in a wound to his chest or wound to his hands. The next one was Jesus would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. And that's in Zechariah 11:12. And I said to them, if you like, give me my wages, whatever I am worth, but only if you want to. So they counted out for my wages 30 pieces of silver. So they were talking about the value. And again, this was Zechariah. He was talking about the shepherd. He was, of course, we know that Jesus was used, the shepherd was used as a reference to Jesus in the Old Testament. And Zechariah was having a prophecy about the coming good shepherd. So he was talking about the worth, what he would be worth. When Jesus was betrayed, he was betrayed for the price of 30 pieces of silver. So for Judas Iscariot, that relationship with Christ, his relationship with Christ had a value on it to him of 30 pieces of silver. It was worth betraying Christ for that amount. So if you look at the odds of that, again, we're stacking all these together. So we're just 5 prophecies in. But what would be the odds that someone would be betrayed for exactly 30 pieces of silver? And they put those odds at 1 in 1,000. And again, I think they're really low on a lot of these. And then it said the worth of the shepherd, again, talking about the 30 pieces of silver. This is the 6th prophecy. Will be thrown on the temple floor and then will be given to the potter. So Zechariah 11:13 says, and the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, this magnificent sum in which they valued me, talking about the 30 pieces of silver. So I took those 30 coins and threw them to the potter at the temple of the Lord. Reading that prophecy at the time, they didn't see what that meant, but after Judas betrayed Christ, he went back to the temple and he was so ridden with guilt, he tried to give the 30 pieces of silver back to the Pharisees, back to the Jewish leaders, and they wouldn't take it from him. So he ends up throwing it on the floor in the temple, exactly what Zechariah said, that it would be thrown to the potter at the temple of the Lord. He threw the 30 pieces of silver on the floor. The religious leaders, they picked up the 30 pieces of silver and they ended up using that 30 pieces of silver to buy a plot of land from a potter, and they turned it into a cemetery. So again, those 30 pieces of silver went to the potter after it was thrown on the temple's floor, exactly like it said in Zechariah. Again, I don't even know how you would put odds to something like that. They finally settled on the odds of 1 in 100,000, which again I think is low. The 7th prophecy was Isaiah 53:7. He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, like a sheep is silent before his shears, he did not open his mouth. So they were looking at Jesus Christ when he was crucified. He was before Potter, and they gave him an opportunity to defend himself. You know, we know you're innocent. Speak up for yourself. And Jesus wouldn't do it. So they put the odds on that are a little bit lower. They put that at 1 in 1,000. And then the last one we're going to look at is the last one they used in their book was the prophecy of the manner of Christ's death. And again, that was 800 years before he was crucified. In Psalms 22:16, he says, my enemies surround me like a pack of dogs, and evil gang closes in on me. They have pierced my hands and feet. And it's just so mind-bogglingly accurate. The prophecies of the Messiah and the things that Jesus fulfilled during his time on earth is just astounding. So if we combine all these together, if we multiply all the different odds they came up with, the odds of it being, the odds of one person fulfilling all 8 of those prophecies was 1 in 9.5 to the 16th power. So that's 9 quintillion, 500 quadrillion that somebody would fulfill all of those. And I didn't even know quadrillion was a real number. Like, it sounds like something you'd hear on Bugs Bunny or something. It's not a real number. But it's 9 quadrillion, where'd it go? 9 quintillion, 500 quadrillion. That's 95 followed by 15 zeros. That's the odds that one person would fulfill just 8 of the 500 prophecies of the coming Messiah. And it just boggles my mind. Now, why do we spend an entire session talking about the prophecies of Christ? Because if we don't know who Christ is, if we don't believe who he is, then looking at his life doesn't matter. There are all kinds of people that are good role models. There are people in history that were great philosophers, that brought great messages, that had world-changing philosophies about how we treat each other and how we relate to each other and how to conduct yourself. There were all these philosophers, all these great wise people throughout history. But none of them was the Son of God but one. None of them had the ability to bridge that gap back to a relationship with God, but one person in all of history. And when you look at the odds, when you look at the probability that one person was going to make all these prophecies, and there are so many more that only were fulfilled by Christ. There are people that have dedicated their lives to studying these, and way smarter people than me that look through the Bible and look at prophecy and look at different things said by different prophets throughout the history. And again, this is through many different people all throughout history in different times, in different places, writing in different places. All of this is put together, and to call those odds astronomical, I think is just incredibly low. And it's incredibly naive to look at these things and say, that was just by chance. Jesus knew the scripture, so he perfectly fulfilled all 500 of them. It's just astronomical. It's astronomical to have that belief. Like I said, as we go through this class means nothing if you don't view Jesus Christ as the Son of God. If you don't believe that his life here was to provide salvation for you, then this class means nothing. It's not worth studying. It's not worth taking notes on, because it doesn't matter. That's why here for our first session, I want you guys to get this. I want you guys to understand. I want you guys to leave with more faith than what you came in with. Because it matters. Because it matters. Because what we study changes eternity, not only for us, but for the people we love, the people we care about. This is why we share the gospel of Christ, because we believe it makes a difference. I am over time, so I'm going to cut off there. We will be back next week for session 3 and session 4. We are out.